And Ruby, would you be able to enable the screen share and I can start?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Do I need to give Samantha's screen share too, or yes?
No, I think we should be able to go back and forth now. Should be good.
Okay.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah. Before we start though, Emily and Samantha, could you just tell us a little bit about yourselves and like how, what you're doing in the ecosystem, how you got into Salesforce, just so we have a little background?
Yeah, that'd be great. Sam and I have a little tradition of introducing each other. So
Oh, great.
this is even a little trickier because I don't think I can tell your Salesforce origin story, Sam. So I'll just say I'll pass it to you. Samantha and I met because we both write a blog and it just happened to sound pretty similar. So we got in touch with each other and said, wow, it seems like we have a lot of values in this data technology mission driven space. Samantha is like, I'd say a multi-potentialite who can do this deep technology work at the same time as like knitting and crocheting, really amazing stuff, and is part of many different initiatives within the Salesforce ecosystem that are really making life for nonprofits using Salesforce and using technology in general better every day. And I would highlight the work that she does with Conga Composer and document mail merge kind of stuff. So if you are looking for any more info on that, that is all in Samantha's wheelhouse. And maybe Sam, you could tell your Salesforce origin story.
I got into Salesforce stuff accidentally. I was working in a nonprofit that focused on food sovereignty, and they adopted Salesforce, and it sort of fell into my lap. And I realized that working in operations really suited my my mindset, my curiosity, my ambition, my like strive for effectiveness in nonprofits. And so that just kind of took off. And as I was starting to learn the ropes with Salesforce, I noticed that social justice activists in my network were having trouble with spreadsheets. And so I started writing about technology, spreadsheets, and social movements and how we can build together. And that's how I started my blog, The Data Are All Right. And that was about 5 years ago. And I just published my 200th blog post. So it's been quite a journey. Yeah, so that's sort of, and then along the way, I got to meet a lot of amazing people and take some there were people here talking about certifications. I have some of them. So if you want to talk about that more, you can send me a message. But now I'll introduce Emily. We love to give presentations together because we just are really like a match made in heaven when it comes to collaborators. Emily is super visionary. It can get their hands on kind of any piece of technology, not just Salesforce. So something they're really good at is APIs, and that could be like connecting systems to Salesforce or connecting other systems to other systems. Emily is a phenomenal writer and has some of their writing that I really love has been some candid sharing about mental health stuff that they experience, and that's an overlap that we have. And also Emily is really inspires me as a parent. And we like each kind of jog in our own lanes, but then we lift each other up and share with each other as much as we can. And so Emily, do you want to share your part of the Salesforce journey?
Yeah, I was working at Teach for America and they adopted Salesforce. So it was all on the job learning. And I sort of proudly have no certifications. I'm on the other side of trying to be able to share the experience I was able to have, this was already, 10 years ago or so that this was possible. But my experience has been the ability to learn and have Salesforce or other technology be a major part of my work by just learning on the job. And I like that as a path, in addition to the, I do Code Academy and other online classes too. So it's not like I dislike online trainings in any way or certifications in general. But I like to show that there's multiple paths to success with this work. Okay. I'm sort of a beginner with, oh, sorry, Ruby, do you want to go ahead?
Oh, one of the things I wanted to preface, the reason why I felt that this topic and that I reached out to Emily and Samantha is that at the end of the day, in any CRM, if you don't have good data, good clean data in there, then it's garbage in, garbage out. And for nonprofits especially, that now are being taxed with having to give a lot more detailed information about their outcomes, the nonprofits especially have to migrate and graduate from their spreadsheets into a single source of truth system, whether it be Salesforce or some other type of CRM. But if they don't get the handle on their data, on having and understanding the importance of good data and good hygiene habits around data, then it won't matter whether they're using spreadsheets or a CRM. So really it's got to start with the data. And that's why I felt this is such a timely topic, because I'm seeing this replicated in projects I'm working on, that people really struggle with this piece. And I feel like you guys have gotten some really good systems in place. I'm super excited that you're going to be able to share your ideas and your thoughts with us.
Amazing. Thank you. Okay, just to give a quick intro to ground us in what we'll be doing, we're going to take, when it's data work, that can raise a lot of emotions. We're going to take a moment for mindfulness. And then Sam and I are going to sort of trade off going into these. I hope you saw in the registration this kind of list of 5 practical tools. So with us, it's never just tools. It's always some kind of philosophy or higher level thought around the work. So we're going into those areas, but we will highlight tools. We're going to go through them fairly quickly so that we intro them and then leave it up to you all to say what you might want to hear more about on this list or even elsewise, So we're going to have a lot of interaction towards the later part of the time. And then Samantha and I are able to stay on sort of the extra 15 minutes if people have to jump after 60 minutes, but we can do some Q&A and more practical work on that end. Okay. I have the image here to help with any breathing if anyone needs it, but you do not have to follow it. You do not have to, there's no prescription for this moment, but I would just like us to, if you want, you can close your eyes. If you want to follow the breath work here, you can. But I just want to say a little bit about taking a moment for mindfulness with this work. So we all know that our world is always changing, and experiencing the impermanence of the world can be impactful on us in ways that can be both energizing, but also exhaust us. And the spaces that we inhabit when we are working on or thinking about data quality, that can be full of impermanence as well. If we think of data in our systems as a reflection of what has happened or what is happening in the world around us, then our data will be a reflection of impermanence. The tech systems that we use to hold the data and work with the data also change at a pace that's faster than anything we've experienced before. Salesforce itself comes out with updates every 3 months. So what does data quality mean for us in this context? I don't think there's a single metric or definition that we can apply universally to say data quality, but there are common experiences that we can have on this journey. At times we might feel overwhelmed by the size and the stakes of managing our data quality, particularly in mission-driven work. And when this happens, it can be good for us to stop and just remember a few things. We are not alone on this path. This user group shows it. We're here all together. Because the world is changing, data is also always changing. And how we view and understand the past, including our past historical data, that's subject to the context from which we're looking at it. There's no sign of perfection in this work. And we don't make our data quality dashboards just to look at pretty perfect numbers all day. Data quality is not a problem that we need to solve. It's an ongoing part of our work that we can be present to in each moment. So I'm going to give us just a moment to take maybe 1-2 breaths together. I'll take 2 breaths, and you don't have to follow the image on the screen, just to ground us in these thoughts. All right, thank you, everybody. So let's go into the first of these 5 kind of practical areas of work around data quality. Required fields, requiring fields, validating information. This is going to be really Salesforce specific because it's Salesforce User Group, but the topics can be sort of applied to any database system. So why would we require anything in our systems? To me, the answer is it's a form of control. And that can bring up a lot of emotions for people, I think, when we say it that way, both and sometimes I think it can be a little hesitant feeling. But really what we're saying is we have certain expectations for how this data should be in our system, how it would come out in our reports, how we talk about it. It gives us a framework to work with our data. So it's a form of controlling that structure. But what can go wrong with that? It could be really frustrating for users who might have some information to put in a system, but not the required information. When they hit a block, that can cause an emotional reaction as well. And we need to be aware of that for our users.
Or it can just cause bad data if people just put NA or anything just to get past the rule.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Particularly, I think, I don't know actually in the for-profit world, but in the nonprofit world, I see that people are go-getters. They're like, problem, here's my workaround. I'll just put in what I think I can. So in Salesforce specifically, there's 3 areas that I want to look at together for using required fields. So I'm just going to hit this up. The first place that you can require information to be entered is on this field level. I'm gonna have to turn off my video for my internet to go fast enough here. On the field level, so when you create a field that will take information in, right? First name, last name, email, anything like that. When you create that field, you have the option of making it required. So here it is, here's on the back end of Salesforce, or on the contact object, fields and relationships. We have a field in this org called approach. I don't know, but you can see right here, required. This makes it required across the board universally. We also have, let me go back to my links. We also have the option of layout level, layout level security. So if you're not familiar with different layouts of Salesforce, you can choose different fields for different reasons for people to view your information. So a common one in Salesforce is on the opportunity record. If you have donations that need certain information on them, or grants. It's both money coming in, but you have really different information potentially for what you want to view about those 2 types of money. So you may want a field required on one of those kinds of records, but not on the other. So instead of using that universal field level requirement, you're going to want to use your layout requirement. And so on a page layout, you'll get to go into each field that's on there and edit it to say it is required on that particular layout. Okay, lastly, we have validation rules, another part of Salesforce that we can utilize to have some control over our data entry. So validation rule is simply to say, you can't save this record unless data is in the way that we want it to be in. So it's a rule-based kind of rule. I'm sorry, my internet is so slow here. I don't know what's going on today in New York. But I will show that. So here, back on your object manager, way down at the bottom of here, I have validation rules, and this should show my rules as soon as this pulls up. And then I could show it in action, but maybe I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to waste time loading page records. If we want to go a deeper dive into these, we can go into it.
I'll say one fun fact about validation rules that I really like about them is that, and I think this even shows us in the error condition formula, the second row, is that they're really useful for having combinations of fields that need to be filled out or that need to have a certain value, not just be populated, but be populated with something that makes sense. Whereas the field level ones, you can only do one at a time. And with validation rules, you can also exclude certain things. So I have a validation rule at my day job that says, you know, you're not allowed to change a grant from awarded back to open, because once it's awarded, everything should be kind of locked down. It's a contract. You can't just go around changing stuff. But then I made an exception that says, unless you're a system administrator, because every once in a while we do have to change something about a record. And so the error condition that we have checks the profile of the person who's editing the record, and you only get the validation rule to work if you're program staff, but not if you're an admin. So you can get into really advanced kinds of, oh, good, we got one.
I think this is just coming from the required field, but this is the same thing that you would see with a validation rule, and it could tell you what you need to do to fix it.
Yeah, like there's another org that I support that says one of these 5 checkboxes has to be checked off. We don't care which one. And they're audience segmentation checkboxes. So it should be like, you're either a client or a donor or a VIP or whatever. And if none of those things are checked off, then you probably shouldn't be in the database. So the validation rule checks that at least one of them has been checked off, and you would need a validation rule for that, because you can't make any one of those fields required, or else it defeats the purpose of having different kinds of categories.
Amazing, thank you. Okay, so one additional consideration here is that when you have these different places where you can require fields on the field level, the layout, the validation rules, it can get a little confusing between all of them. And you saw I had to click in a lot of different places in the back end of Salesforce to get around. So documentation around this, even just for your own sanity, can be really helpful because of all these different places. And that's something that's kind of common in Salesforce right now. Many different places to do the somewhat similar actions. Okay, duplicate management. Duplicate management is high on everybody's mind. So there are duplicates and then there are duplicates. So let's see if I can pull up. We've got duplicates that are real. Oh, I'm gonna hit admit there. All right, so I made 2 fake people called common first and common last. Our typical thing is like a John Smith. You kind of think like, okay, a lot of people have that name. Is it a duplicate, or are they the same? Are they really different people with the same name? Of course, you do have people who are the same person, and that would make these people, if they were the same person, if we knew for sure, yes, there's only one person by this name that works at this organization, then that would be a true duplicate. And then we also have, I don't know if you have a fun name for this, Samantha, but like the tricky duplicates in reports.
Oh yeah, like when you're running, the example I always use is if you're running a contact role report, then you see the opportunity info repeated every line. So if me and Emily are both contact roles on the same opportunity, then you'll see each of our names be different. And then you'll see the opportunity for $1 million, same close date, same stage, same everything. And you start to wonder, why is this opportunity on there twice? And especially if you didn't drag any contact fields in, so you just see all the opportunities repeated, it can be really tricky. And I don't have a name for them, Emily, but
I'm calling them visual duplicates.
Yeah.
So here, these are, I think your opportunity one is a great one. Also campaigns. So this org renamed the campaigns object, but campaigns and campaign members. So the person named Test 100, it looks like they're in this same campaign a million times, but if you look at the ID of the campaign, that it's actually a different campaign with the same name. So these are truly, this person went to this campaign and this person went to this campaign, but it definitely looks like duplicates. That's another one that if you have, like Sam, you said, you have to pull in sometimes the right fields to see if it is a duplicate or not. Yeah.
Emily, what should we do if there are real duplicates?
If there are real duplicates, then, well, there's one question you want to ask. There's always going to be duplicates. So the if is little. What do you do when there are duplicates? Do you bring duplicates in to Salesforce and deal with them there, or try to keep them out from however the days come in? So like validation rules to keep duplicates out. Here's some practical Salesforce tools. So the MPSP household management tool. Let me get to that. I'm sorry that my internet is like really kicking it. So if they're in there, you want to have some tools for managing them. If you're NPSP, and this is nonprofit group, so that's a little bit specific to that. If you have many people that are separate contacts, separate households, but they really should be in the same household, then you can add people to a household using the MPSP household merge. And that will, the benefit of that is to make it so that you are not creating like empty accounts, anonymous accounts that happen if you use the regular Salesforce merge of people. There's also the Salesforce contact merge. So you can get to that from contact by just searching for contact merge. I think I'm not going to show them just because of the consideration my internet's going so slow. But we can go into them if that's a place that we want to dive deeper. Salesforce also keeps a record of all of your duplicates in duplicate sets, and that's its own object with related records. So that's something within Salesforce that you can use to track using a report your duplicate sets. To keep them out of Salesforce, you can use duplicate rules, matching rules. So you get to set up when would a duplicate be a duplicate. So we have a pretty common one where if you share the same name and email that you are a duplicate. So if I were to try to add this email to this person, I get an error message that says, this looks like an existing record. Can you make sure to check any duplicates before saving? So you get some options with these rules about, do you want to allow the duplicates to get created and just have a little error message? Do you want to block these from being created? That's a really powerful tool for that.
And Emily, the tool is free, but you have to turn it on, and it's not automatically on. So we were trying to think of things that we could share in this user group where, like, if your life is set up such that you go to work on Monday, you could go to work on Monday and be like, I learned something, let's turn it on. So this is one of those tips that if you don't have duplicate rules on, you could turn them on. It's pretty easy to do. And it is very practical and useful.
Absolutely. One additional consideration I want to give with duplicate rules, whether you're using what's internal to Salesforce, or if you're setting up something like a third-party add-on like Duplicate Checker, rules and automations will only get you so far. A lot of times we're dealing with humans, human data, and not just widgets. And human data needs a human touch. So maybe only you will know if John Smith is the same John Smith as the other John Smith in there. So we shouldn't expect perfection in automation to keep out duplicates. We should expect to see duplicates and be dealing with them pretty much always. Sam, do you want screen share? I can keep it if you want to.
I will screen share because I have some tabs as well.
Excellent.
Whoops. Okay, pushed the wrong button. Let's minimize some things and share. All right. All right. I'm ready. So my part of the presentation is sharing about the data entry side. So we got to hear from Emily about what we might call metadata, which is the setup of Salesforce and the rules and the back end of Salesforce or any database that you're using. But those only get activated when new data gets entered into the system. Data entry is something that I'm really passionate about. Let's start this slideshow so everyone can see this cute GIF. I think in my work in nonprofit and social movement orgs, I've noticed that there's a strong interest in avoiding data entry or trying to offload it onto somebody else. Like, can't the intern do data entry for me? Or can't my email automatically be saved in Salesforce so I don't have to do data entry? And I always say, sure, there are ways to avoid it, but there's a huge amount lost by avoiding data entry. So we're gonna share this presentation out, but there's a link here to a blog post that I wrote actually about how I actually love data entry, and I find it to be very this might seem really corny to some of you or all of you, but I actually find it to be very spiritually fulfilling to type in names of people who are involved in supporting the mission of a nonprofit. And I just really like to think about that person and appreciate that that person is giving their time or money to a nonprofit that I'm aligned with. And I just think like, wow, that's so incredible. You know, they could like go to happy hour, but instead of going to happy hour, they helped do voter registration. And now I'm volunteering my time by typing their name into the system so that we can really honor their contribution. And how amazing is that? And I actually don't want that part to be automated. I actually find it to be very meaningful and a big reason for why we even have systems in the first place. But at the same time, I recognize that it is time consuming. It can be tedious, and it's also really easy to make mistakes. And so I've spent a lot of time and oftentimes in collaboration with Emily, thinking about how can we make data entry better. And we've come up with some ideas for outside of the system, like having a data entry dance party or having a data entry ice cream sundaes, bringing people together to do data entry at the same time so that it feels less isolating, but also making the interface for data entry more productive. And this is particularly important, I think, when you have to enter data into more than one object. And this is so common in NPSP. Now, when you're adding a donation, you might be adding an opportunity, a contact, a household, an opportunity contact role, and soft credit all at the same time. So you're populating 5 records, but you're with what, like in my head, the idea is one donation is split into 5 different places. And at my day job, I noticed that a lot of data quality problems come from having to enter data in so many places that it's really easy to forget one. So I put the contact in, and I put the opportunity in. I forgot to connect them. Oh, well, I feel like my work is done. And so why can't we build forms so that you put all of the data in and then it gets distributed out to the right place in the data model for reporting and for other purposes? So that's where we get this idea of data entry experience, that we can design a place where the person who knows the information can tell a story in one setting. The form can even be pre-filled, so it can look up a contact or look up an address, and then you push one submit button, and then the data gets stored in the system. So I'm going to show you an example of this shortly, and we're going to talk about a few ways for how to do it in Salesforce and NPSP. Before we do that, here's my caveat. This is like level 2. You know, it's not really available out of the box, with one exception. But also it takes time to set up. There sometimes can be errors. It can be a little bit hard to change the fields that show up on it. And so it's a kind of a big commitment to decide to do this. So
but Samantha has put, along with a lot of our other colleagues, their learnings online. So I would say there is incredible online information to learn this in addition to the certification route. You know, and Samantha, thank you for sharing when you learn, writing about it and sharing, because I've learned some stuff from flows from you.
Yeah. So this, what you see on the screen, is a flow, Salesforce flow, out of the box. There's I built it, I built the questions and stuff for it, but there's no other bells and whistles. So this is just a screen flow. You can learn how to build these with Trailhead and some practice. But something that's really cool is that these questions on top map to the organization record, and these on the bottom map to a custom object that we call demographics. The idea being every year, someone from the organization will fill this out and we'll be able to see change over time. So there's many demographic records that are attached to each one organization record. But instead of having to fill out the org first and then go and fill out the demographics, why not fill it out all in one? And then me as the system designer will make sure that the data gets stored in the right place. So this is really, I found it to be very transformative once I got over the hump of actually building these things, which was felt like a big mountain to climb. And I can say now that I reached a peak that I see yet another peak ahead because that's how mountains are. But wherever you're starting, if you're starting on an anthill or you're starting on a big trek, then you can get to the point where you're building these forms. There's so many ways to do it. Like, I think flow is really cool. It's like the big thing right now. But you can also do it the same exact thing with form products from the App Exchange. So a really popular one is Form Assembly. There's lots of other vendors that do it as well. FormStack, Form Titan, Form this, Form that. There's there's a lot of them, and they all have slightly different quirks. So just thinking about, you might already be thinking, okay, new contact. You're customizing what are the fields that are going to show up on that. You already do that as an admin or as a learner. You're starting to learn how to design those pages. This is a way of taking it to the next level, which is designing pages that combine multiple objects or one object, I guess. It's just, you can put instructions in, like this is all custom text. You can change the order of the questions. There's all kinds of stuff you can do. So that,
Samantha, I have a quick question. So as the user of this, then would I have, how would that display for me? Would that be like a quick screen where I would be able to just populate all of the relevant information instead of having to go from screen to screen to screen?
yeah, so you could do it with the in Salesforce. Let's actually go to Salesforce. So you can do it with a quick action which would be more for a very short form. I don't know if I have any on here. Looks like I don't, but it's basically the equivalent of pushing a button like this, and then it opens a screen. This screen is not a quick action, it's a custom page, but you can open forms that way, but you can also embed them right in Lightning component. So right on a page. So I have a tab here. This is to show contacts. Instead of showing contacts, I could put a flow right there. Just drag it in. I don't think I have an example of that in this particular org, but that's one way that you could expose it. You can also expose it in a—
while you're talking, Sam, so that we can, if we go back to it, we can have them.
Yeah. Yeah, and if I went into this other sandbox, but then I had multi-factor, so I'm just gonna, but I would love, at the end of the presentation, if we have time, Ruby, I would love to show you some other examples. And I also have this open to show kind of how this is built. So I'm probably not going to do a super deep dive on this at the moment, but I just wanted to show you that it's a few elements. Each one of these, we call them an element in flow. And then inside of the screen flow is where the questions go and the answer boxes. And then each question has to get mapped. So the field organization gets, or I guess this is the history, org history. This is the field on the record. This is the field on the object, org history. What text should get saved in that field? The text that was typed in on the form. So that's how we connect the form part, the part that people type into, to the actual field so that it's saved in Salesforce and you can see it on a record page or in a report. And then once you've done the mapping, this is like, so I wish I had more time to go into this, then you actually save it using this update element. And this is what it looks like live. So this has real data in it from a real org. So this is question text, answer text, etc. You go all the way through, and then you can hit next, which actually it's the next button is the save button. I just never figured out how to save over the text of it, which is kind of silly, but everything is a work in progress. So great example of humility, that this is very much still a work in progress, something I'm actively working on. So, okay, last thing I'm going to show is data quality reports. So whether you've turned on validation rules and required fields and duplicate checks, and you built out all of these screen flows so that people can type everything in the easiest possible way, that doesn't mean that you're not going to have to monitor data. And so data quality reports are one of my favorite tools for this, and I use them. All of the things that we're talking about today are things that we actually do. This is not like, oh, this is the best practice, but no one actually does it. It's like me and Emily do these things all the time for our own benefit at our real jobs. So there's this idea, maybe you've encountered this idea before. I certainly didn't come up with it, called dashboard of zeros. I linked out to a video. That's a really, really good video. But you can also you can design these kind of reports called exception reports. Let me explain that. Usually when I'm running a report, I want to see lots of records, lots of rows. So if I run a donations report, I want to see lots of donations because that would mean that my nonprofit is financially solvent. An exception report is kind of the opposite. It's show me all of the donations that are missing a contact. And so in the perfect world, there would be no records show up because all of them have a contact, but we all know we're talking about real life. Sometimes they don't have contacts. It's useful to scoop those records out so that we can give them some special attention. And so NPSP has a built-in feature for this called the health check. and it takes like 3 minutes to run. So I didn't pre-run it, but I did want to show you a real dashboard that I use. And then also for any of you, if you get like a new job or a new consulting gig or something with a nonprofit that uses NPSP, the first thing I always do is run the health check. It gives me some ideas about things that might not be in tip-top shape. And it's usually low-hanging fruit, so I can get some early wins and build confidence and trust with the team, and then move on to maybe some things that are harder. So I'm just going to show you this dashboard. This is a real dashboard in my real org. So this is a combination. This is not a plain vanilla dashboard of zeros. This is a combination. So this one, you're supposed to have grants going to the November board meeting. So this should never be zero. But this one, payment discrepancies, right? Discrepancy, bad. We don't want discrepancies. This one is a great example of a dashboard of zero. And it looks like there's one grant that has a payment discrepancy. So let's look at the criteria, because it's very simple, which is just that the recommended amount does not equal the payment amount. So one of them is wrong. Is the recommended amount wrong? Is the payment amount wrong? Personally, just looking at this, I don't know. Why is this? Yeah, so this staff person said this grant should be for 300,000, but then put in 600,000. I now see, now that I actually opened this, that it's a modification. So they're actually proposing giving more money than we first recommended. And that's why it's like this. But this is such a good example. Like, if I didn't have my brain turned on, then I would be like, this is a problem, right? We have a rule. The rule found one record. And but then when I looked at it more closely, I realized, oh my gosh, it's a false alarm. It's a false alarm. It's good that the payments have been increased. Eventually in November, this will be approved and we'll change the grant amount. So it's I didn't even plan this. I swear. But yeah, we use these all the time. So payments missing is another big one. I'm not going to get into like what the context is of what payments mean within this organization, but hopefully you can look at an example like this and apply it to the kinds of data that might be missing in the context where you're working, and you can design reports that will illustrate records that are missing something so that you can actually deal with them. And that's what the real lesson of this tool is. I'm just going to show you one more hot tip, which is that this is a dashboard that shows everything in the whole Salesforce org. So all 40 or so people who work at my job. And I use this as the admin to kind of get a bird's eye view. But if I was Jennifer, I don't want to see everyone else's grants that have problems. I only want to see my own grants. So this is called a dashboard filter, and you can learn how to build them by looking at documentation or Trailhead. So I'm going to select Jen. And now all of these are going to be rerun with applying this filter. And now Jen can see all of her stuff and actually deal with things that are awaiting her attention. So there's she has 11 discrepancies over here, and she has, 2 reports that she has to approve and whatever. So instead of making personal dashboards for people, you can have one dashboard, and then you can have options to further limit it based on who's looking at it and what their goals are. I think that talked about that. Now I'm going to pass back to Emily, right?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
All you, Emily.
Okay, so we are, why am I not seeing this? just want to share my whole screen, but I'm not sure I can. So tell me, Samantha, if you would, if I am not showing what I'm talking about. So last thing here, I could not find a nice data movement one. So this is what Giphy brought me, and I actually thought it was kind of funny. But data movement is a huge part of our data quality. Data is always moving. So where does data move? It can move within our system. It can move from system to system. It can move from a system out of a system into a report, a PDF that you print out, or just an email you send where you've typed up information from your system. Data is just constantly in motion. And why does it move? Because of all the reasons that I'm sure you all might think of. But one of the big ones could be that it exists in different systems, but you want to see it all in one place from those different systems. So you need to move it from at least one to another, or from two different ones to a third place. So how does it move like that? A really common term we have is ETL, extract, transform, load. And that just means taking data, extracting it from one place. Usually your systems don't have everything in common. So one system captures states as abbreviations. The other system captures it as the full name of the state. So that's the transforming data from one to the next. And then you load it into your other system. You can do this with spreadsheets. So I wanted to show, can you see this spreadsheet if I pull it up?
Not at the moment.
No, okay, I think it's, let me see if I hit new share. I think I have to choose an application to share. Okay, I didn't come up with fake data. I'm trying to redact data. I didn't redact the data. That's what I was trying to do. So spreadsheets, okay. Spreadsheets can be a great tool for moving data around. Here's a real one that's since been retired, but I'm going to show it off. And it's a little redacted, but you can imagine first name, last name, email. So we have a spreadsheet that is taking in data from Salesforce and taking in data from another system called Arlo. We just would download reports into CSV form and pop them into this spreadsheet. And we had to bring in the data from the contacts object, the organizations object, our trainings object, and then data from another system outside of Salesforce, Arlo, because we wanted data from these two systems to move, one from Arlo into Salesforce, and we didn't have a way to do it. We download these reports, and then we have all of these different tabs of the spreadsheet that are saying, all right, we're getting information about organizations. Check, does the organization exist in Salesforce already? If not, then we have to create a new one. Did the contact exist already in Salesforce? If not, we have to create a new one. Then we have to identify what training they went to. Then we have to create some additional information. We have to transform it in a certain way. Then we have to add a tag to it. Then we have to link it to the campaign. And then we have to get it into where we can actually create campaign members. And after we just needed the training, the status, the company, and the contact ID to load into Salesforce. And there was all this work that had to go into it. And to be honest, this was a pretty cool system when we built it. It actually saved a huge amount of manual data entry time. But we didn't stop there. So there's a bunch of other fancy systems you could use to take the place of all those spreadsheets. Write all the rules in them. There's Power BI, Omatic, Apsona, lots of different places. But there's also another way that you can be moving this data. It's through application programming interfaces, or APIs.
Emily, you should go back to your slides.
Thank you. Okay, new share. Back to slides. Here we go. Okay, so APIs, they are the way that two different systems can talk to each other. I always say it's a little bit of a misnomer, because when you think interface, you think you're going to see a website, but a lot of this is invisibly happening behind the scenes. So here's a low code option I want to share, Zapier. We replaced that whole spreadsheet and all the deals with it with this process in Zapier, where you can say, when there is something new happening in Arlo, in this case, a registration, here's the rules and the steps to take, and do it every time. So there's a lot of problem solving that goes into building something like this. So first we found out we have to see, does the campaign exist in Salesforce? If it does, we can do a few things. If it doesn't, we have a whole other set of steps we have to take. But in a program like this, you can branch out and you can say, great, if you did find the campaign. So how does it find the campaign? Zapier takes advantage of APIs and calls on my Salesforce instance. I'm logged in automatically to my Salesforce instance through here, and Zapier says, hey, Salesforce, here's an ID for, or here's a name of a campaign. Did you find it? Okay, if you did, that's great. That means true, we found it. Now we'll see if the campaign member exists. If it does, we'll go this way. If not, we'll go that way and create it. So you can create, update, using Zapier, because Salesforce APIs don't want you to delete records accidentally. You cannot use an interface like this to delete records, but you could use code like Python to write APIs and to use to do delete records. But there are endless options.
You could use Zapier to check off a box that says delete this, and then you could have a flow that starts to delete it.
Oh, workaround. You see, nonprofit folks never say no. Never
Emily,
say no.
I've heard you talk about this system, but I've never seen the web page, and it is so slick.
They just upgraded their interface, but I have to tell you, what I'm doing here is pushing the limits of it, and I've been talking to more advanced systems. So I want to show you just one of the reasons I'm talking to other systems is, so let's say this happened, like, how do I know, how can I trust that the data from Arlo made it in and it's matching and it's doing good? There's a lot of systems that can do that for you. I just want to show you that you can do that yourself. So I have Salesforce data coming into here and Arlo data coming into here using APIs. And I've set up some formulas to check for discrepancies. And I have a process with my intern and myself where we sort of weekly resolve any discrepancies. We could build some new rules into our Zap to handle those. As Sam just said, this is an ongoing process, and this is a bit of a DIY business intelligence system and dashboard of zeros, if you will. I want to show one other way. You don't have to use Zapier. I just want to show this example. So this is Google Sheets using a free add-on called API Connector. I actually pay for the pro version, but you can use it very well for free if you have a little knowledge about using APIs. So this is the Zoom API. I've written a little note here, and every time someone registers for a Zoom event that I have going on, it's going to throw them, it's scheduled to run this API and call on Zoom and say, hey, Zoom, can you get me this information? Has anything been updated? And new lines will be added. And then I have done my own spreadsheet thing to put in like a better display of these names. And there's how I send reminders to people. There's a lot of stuff that can be done. And I actually am using a Zap to send myself a text message every time someone new registers. So it says, Samantha just registered for the like 722 version of this event. So those are practical tools that are really great for your data movement. From spreadsheets to APIs, there's a lot to be done, and they work together. They're not mutually exclusive. One last little bonus thing that we wanted to share for data accuracy is
we're at time. I think we might have to
you're
put
right.
in a footnote and to show people the thank you slide. And we're going to stick around, so maybe we can share this, but if people have questions, I feel like we should give them a chance.
You're right. Thank you, Samantha.
We're just having too much fun over here.
We had many more hours of content we wanted to share. We cut it down.
Well, I think that you're definitely going to have to come back. That's all there's to it. Because this is like, I am super impressed. Like, I had never even thought, I mean, I know about Zapier, but I never thought about using Zapier quite in this way to help with the data movement. So that's pretty impressive. The other thing too is this I was going to ask you, are you using the NPSP data importer tool at all? When
Oh
you're
my
moving-
gosh, that is the thing that I forgot to talk about. NPSP data importer. I love it. It's so powerful. I think Dodie has given a talk on it or will be soon.
Mhm.
But that is the back end for gift entry, which is so powerful and can help you avoid having to make a screen flow. And it is so cool. And you all should try it out, or we can talk about just that sometime. But it's a great time saver and data quality enforcer that's built into NPSP. And it's built on top of the data importer.
There's a lot of data load tools that we talked about that we could spend an hour or two just going into those.
Ruby, what's your favorite thing about the NPSP data importer?
Well, you're able to use one spreadsheet. I guess in the past, you would have to do like a separate spreadsheet for account, contact, opportunity, and any other data. And on the data importer tool, what they do is you put everything into one spreadsheet, then it goes into this other object, custom object where it houses all the data, and then it pushes it into it pushes all that data into its proper objects in NPSP. So you don't have to do multiple spreadsheets. You just do it all on one.
And you can even add more objects to the NPSP data importer.
Yeah.
I haven't done that yet, but you totally could.
And potentially you can see the connection here to what Samantha showed with Flow, how that importer is working, and just as like a confidence builder for Flow, if you're talking already about how to use one sheet to impact multiple objects, that's something that you're using the aspects of Flow to do, or you can. So you're already on your way if you've,
And form assembly is the same way, like any form builder. I've been really pushing myself, Ruby and friends, I've really been pushing myself to use Flow, even when for forms, even when it feels hard, and even if I know form assembly can handle it, because it's free, and because Salesforce is continuing to make it better. I really feel the growing pains of it sometimes. You'll see if you look at some back blog posts, there's some really complainy blog posts from me about how hard it is. So if you find it hard, you're not alone. But I've found that I've been able to do things in Flow that previously I thought I could only do in form assembly, or an equivalent product to form assembly. And that's like $80 a month, or it's more now, but Flow is free, not counting your own time. So pretty cool stuff.
I've had some really interesting conversations recently because I have an org that has so many flows on object updates that we're hitting limits and errors that our flows are getting in the way of each other. So we've actually been talking about how to split up automations that in using different systems. So this is something Samantha and I love to do. There's never like a right or wrong. You can always have some gray area here. So there's lots of opportunity for within Salesforce and even with those other tools. So cool.
How familiar are you with Apsona? Have you used that tool quite a bit? Yes.
I love Apsona. There's so many things to love about it, but one that I really love is that you can essentially store a set of rules for an import. So if you're importing contacts, you can say, okay, first name, email, you can do your custom fields, and you can save that up. So every time you upload that sheet, Apsona will remember it. You want to upload it into the Apsona, fix the data in Apsona, like on the screen, and then you can send it on its merry way into Salesforce, which I think is really amazing. And it'll match for you. So you don't even have to do a VLOOKUP. You can tell it to find existing records. So yeah, Apsona is great. I'm sure you could get Justin to do a user group meeting
Yeah,
He's
he's on my list.
on your list.
Definitely. Yeah.
I also love Apsona's mail merge tool, which is paid separately. But it's really easy to use and powerful and fun to set up.
Oh, very cool. Does anybody have any questions for Emily and Samantha? Any use cases that you're working on or problems that you're having with
Skeletons
data?
in the closet, your worst data quality issue.
Well, I have one.
Worse than the time me and Emily cleaned up 7,000 duplicates.
Wow. Yeah, I have one. The use case I'm working on right now, the client I'm working with had a very painful migration from an old system called NGOC.
I know NGOC.
And apparently what happened was Salesforce bought them out and then all of a sudden decided to turn the lights off. And then when they did, people had to scramble to set up their NPSP. And unfortunately, this organization I'm working with, a nonprofit, very large nonprofit, didn't have the right change management. They just had to go like from one day to the next, all of a sudden they had to migrate. And they were trying to set up NPSP like NGOC. And now they're having 9 months later, having excruciating pain in terms of they had their consultant come in and do all kinds of custom code in order to make it play like look like NGOC, and it's just creating havoc where there's missing GAUs, there's missing all kinds of missing data, things aren't getting pushed over from all their systems. They have all these multiple ways for donors to donate, and they have several different systems, and so the things that they're doing, they just keep on exploding their staff because it takes so much admin time in order to reconcile this stuff. So we're trying to get them off of this old system into NPSP reports with exception reports, very much like how you showed with the dashboard, so that they don't have to go into this old system, what they call batch reports. And then they could go to their dashboards, identify where the data is not clean it up, and then make sure that they can post all this stuff and it goes to finance. So have you encountered those types of situations where they're trying to build something like the old system and now they've got this tremendous amount of tech debt and trying to make them shift into like how NPSP is supposed to work?
Hi, yep, I've been there.
Oh gosh, it's a nightmare.
Yeah, it's really tough. I mean, I think acknowledging that this is hard and that it's a situation that nobody wanted to be in the first place is the first step. Like it's not their fault that NGOC got deprecated. And they, however, NGOC had a lot of downsides and maybe it doesn't seem like that now because it seemed like it was better the old way, but NGOC really did have a lot of limitations. I think Dashboard of Zeros is going to be really helpful, and we're linking out to a talk on YouTube specifically about that. That might give you some more inspiration.
Cool.
And I think it's a really good time to zoom out and determine if the org processes are serving the org, because we built out the system that I manage at my day job. We built it out to reflect the process of the previous system, and that system had a lot of baton pass, like a queue, like the grant goes to me and then I give it to the next person, and that's how I inherited it, and that's how our Salesforce was set up. But the reality is we could set it up now where a grant comes in and everybody gets a chatter notification and then everybody starts working on their part of it, and it's just a completely different frame of mind. And it actually required me doing a huge amount of unlearning. So I turned off all of our validation rules because we had validation rules and they were preventing people from doing their work. So we were like, okay, that's got to go. And then we had to revise a lot of our email alerts because we set up this system where you invite the grant, I work at a foundation, then the grant gets submitted and then it gets reviewed. The people who did the original setup of it didn't ever like understand that after a grant gets submitted, it then gets reopened and then resubmitted and revised and resubmitted. So people were getting thank you for submitting your grant emails like multiple times a day, which was really embarrassing. And it was just like this old way of thinking of like that collaboration looks really different now. So it really just, the thing that helped me the most, and I'm happy to follow up on this with you, Ruby, is I used this diagram called a swim lane diagram that has these horizontal bars, and it shows what the grantee is doing, what the staff are doing, our staff, and what the system is doing. So it has every stage change, every automation, and every like interaction that happens with the system. So we could actually figure out what the heck is happening and why and when. And once we had that tool set up, where I was able to show where where we double back in our own process, that it's not all shifting to the right, that was the thing that unlocked us. So if you haven't done much process mapping, that might be something to look at, and I can share an example of how we did it.
Yeah, actually, I'm the BA on this project, and I'm mapping out all of their current processes so that we can identify how they can transition to the future state that we want them to move them to, which is from the legacy system to NPSP. And we're identifying. So the next step level of this is that I'm mapping out all the exceptions that I'm working with IT. They're creating the dashboard. So that big part of that is just trying to extract that information out of the person who set this horrible system. And I mean, you know, in all fairness to her, she didn't know any better. She was just doing what she knew how to do, right? So it's just trying to get her unlearn that and then start having a different frame of reference for her data and how she can actually clean it up in a much more efficient way. And I think, you know, the slide that I was the most impressed about was the zen of doing data, because, you know, oftentimes it's like this, I think people's frame mindset is that, oh, this is so boring. I know I've been there. It's like, I don't like doing tedious work. My brain doesn't like it. And oftentimes I go, oh, data entry, you know, and I feel like my energy draining out of my body every time I think about it. And it's like, how might we be able to reframe that? Because it is, I mean, we are the stewards of good data.
It's mission critical. It is doing data is the mission of the org. It's not only the programs. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so how might we be able to help people reframe the role that they have in this mission critical role that they have in order to ensure that the organization is really getting good data, and they're the ones who are responsible for it? And how do we create an identity around their like data ninjas or something, you know, to make them feel like they have an elevated role and they're not just like a lowly data entry person that you always like pump that grunt work to the intern to, you know?
Samantha has a great presentation about this, so maybe she can do that presentation or adapt it. I think the reframing part is so prescient for the part of the conversation we came in with, because I think, you know, at nonprofits, we really like to rename things, like instead of customer relationship management, it's constituent relationship management. I think tech debt is a term that's well due for a reframe, because you've both said everyone who did it did the best they could with the information they had at the time. So I don't think it's something necessarily bad to get rid of. Like when I look at the tech debt within Salesforce itself, the reason that we have classic layout pages and lightning layout pages at the same time is because they're in transition to something better. And as much as I can, you know, get a little annoyed at that I have to click around, I also want to appreciate that they're growing, and that's we have the same reflection of ourselves, right? Our systems are always growing and changing. So those things from the past sometimes they were problematic, but I think we can also help our users celebrate to say, like, look at all you did. And that set the groundwork for us to go to this next place.
Awesome. Well, I want to be mindful of our time. So it's 11:16. Well, 11:16 my time. I don't know. You guys are on a different time. Actually, Samantha, are you on the East Coast too?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I want to thank you so much. This has been awesome. And I definitely, if you're up for it, I'd love to invite you back so we can continue having these data conversations, because to me, this is really at the heart of any of the work that we're doing in Salesforce. We have to wrap our heads around how important the data is. And I have this sort of mindset of I follow the data from the time that the donor inputs, or the whoever's inputting that data, and where does that piece of data go into the system. And that's when I started realizing, oh my goodness, this is like so important to really wrap our heads around that. So I'd love for you guys to come back and keep up this conversation, because I think it's super important.
Anytime. Love it. We love it.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everyone who are spending their Saturday morning with us. And I'd love to, please stay in touch. We have our LinkedIn page for Honolulu Users Group. So we do posting there pretty regularly. Next month, I'm going to have a flow master called Terry Miller. And he is going to show us how we can move our process builder information to flows. And he's going to do a side-by-side comparison. I saw his presentation at another user group and I thought, oh my God, I got to have this guy on. So if any of you are trying to migrate from process builder to flow, come and check us out next month. So with that, thank you, Emily and Samantha, and thank you, everyone.
Ruby. Thank you, everyone.
Well, everybody.
Bye.
Aloha.
Meet you.
Aloha.